The coffee maker was already done by the time I got downstairs. That was the first sign that something was off. I always beat it by at least 10 minutes. I stood in the kitchen in my housecoat and wool socks, holding my mug with both hands, looking out at the backyard. The maple was starting to turn. Late September in Waterloo always does that. The color comes fast, like it can't wait. My husband Gordon had planted that maple the year we moved in. 1987. We'd carried it from the nursery in the back of his Chevette, the roots wrapped in burlap, both of us convinced it would die within the month. It didn't. Gordon died 4 years ago. The maple is still there. I'm 67 years old. I wake up early. I drink black coffee. I read the paper at the kitchen table. The actual paper, printed, because I worked for 31 years at a printing company, and I still believe in the weight of ink on newsprint. These are my rituals, and I hold them close. My son is 38. My daughter-in-law is 36. My granddaughters are 7 and 4, and they are the light of my life, and the reason I still keep apple juice in the fridge, even though I gave up juice in 2019. Their names are not the point of this story. What they did is, it started, like most things that hurt, with a group chat. I'm not a heavy phone user. I check messages in the morning, again after lunch, sometimes in the evening if I remember. I don't have notifications turned on for most things because at a certain age you start to understand that urgency is mostly manufactured. So when I opened the family group chat on a Tuesday morning in late October and scrolled back through 17 messages I'd missed since Sunday, I had to sit down. My son had started it. "Mom, we've been thinking about Christmas this year. We want to do something special, something big. The girls are at the perfect age for a real celebration, and we think Hartwell Lodge is the right place." Hartwell Lodge. If you're not from this part of Ontario, let me explain. It's a resort about 40 minutes outside of Waterloo, on a private lake. It has a main lodge with a dining room, 6 or 7 private cabins, ice skating in winter, the whole thing. It's beautiful. It's also not inexpensive. A weekend there runs more than my first mortgage payment. I kept reading. His wife had replied next. We priced it out. The main cabin sleeps 14. We were thinking your side of the family plus ours. So you, Aunt Cynthia, Uncle Rod, and maybe 2 or 3 of your cousins, and obviously our parents and my brother's family. We could do Christmas Eve through Boxing Day. Then my son again. The thing is, Mom, Gordon's side is your thing. We thought maybe you could cover the lodge booking since it's your family, and we'd cover activities and the Christmas dinner itself. My side, my thing. I put the phone down on the table. I picked it up again. The booking for the main cabin. I looked it up right then, still in my housecoat, was $4,200 for that stretch of days. He'd also tagged my sister-in-law, Cynthia, in the message. She'd already replied, "Oh, this sounds lovely. Bev, will you be booking?" They were asking me to spend $4,000 to host Christmas for 20-some people at a resort I'd never suggested. Over a holiday stretch I'd already been quietly dreading, and they'd announced it as a settled plan in a group chat that included my late husband's sister. I closed the app. I went and refilled my coffee. I sat back down and I thought about Gordon. He was not a complicated man in most ways. He liked hockey and crosswords, and the kind of quiet that you have to earn together over texts. But he had a clarity about him when something was wrong. Not a temper, nothing like that. Just a way of going still and saying, "Let's think about this properly." I used to tease him that he'd make a good judge. He'd say he'd make a terrible one because he already knew what he thought before anyone finished talking. What would Gordon think about this? I knew the answer. I'd known it in about 30 seconds. Here is what my son does not know, what neither of them knows, because I never made a point of telling them, and maybe that was my error. When Gordon and I moved to Waterloo in 1987, we didn't have money. We had a truck, a rental unit above a dry cleaner on King Street, and a business idea that Gordon had been carrying around in his head for 2 years. He wanted to open a print shop, small commercial work, business cards, letterhead, flyers for local restaurants, nothing glamorous. We opened Ellison Print and Design in the spring of 1988. I did the books. Gordon ran the machines. We worked 7 days a week for 3 years before we hired our first employee. I used to bring our son to the shop in a playpen and set him up near the front window while I proofed orders. He was a toddler. He doesn't remember any of it. We grew slowly. Gordon added large format printing in the late 90s. We started doing work for the university, then for a regional grocery chain, then for 3 municipalities in the area. By the time Gordon got sick, Ellison Print had 11 employees and a building we owned outright on the edge of the industrial park. After Gordon died, I ran it for 18 months by myself. Then I sold it. I sold it because I am 67, and I had spent 33 years building something that I was proud of, and I wanted to be done. I sold it for a number that was fair and that I will not share here. What I will say is that I am comfortable. I am more than comfortable. My mortgage is paid. My car is paid. I have a financial advisor named Patrick at a firm in Kitchener, and he calls me every quarter and we talk about boring things that make me feel secure. My son knows I sold the business. He does not know the details. He knows his father was a printer. He was present at the funeral. He gave a eulogy that made people cry. He loves us, loved us, in the way that sons love parents when the love is real, but has never been tested. He has never asked me how we built what we built. He has never asked about the years above the dry cleaners, or the playpen by the front window, or the summer we couldn't make payroll and Gordon sold his truck and I cashed a GIC my mother had given me as a wedding gift. He has never asked because it didn't occur to him that there was anything to ask. I replied to the group chat on Thursday. I kept it short. Thanks for thinking of this. I'm not able to commit to the lodge booking. Let me know what other plans you're considering. The reply came within the hour. A voice message from my son. I could hear the girls in the background, some cartoon, and his voice had that particular register he uses when he thinks he's being patient with me. Mom, we already talked to the Hendersons and they're excited. And I tagged Aunt Cynthia. We kind of already told people this was happening. The booking needs to go through by November 1st or we lose the date. I thought this would be nice for you too. Hartwell is beautiful. The girls would love it. I listened to it twice. The second time I noticed he hadn't said anything about the money directly. He hadn't said, we need you to pay $4,000. He'd said the booking needs to go through. He'd said, I thought this would be nice for you too. As if I was being given a gift. I did not reply that day. I didn't reply the next day either. I made myself wait until I could think about it without the heat in my chest that I sometimes get now when I'm more upset than I want to admit. On Saturday, I drove out to the cemetery. I go when I need to think. Gordon is buried next to his parents under a gray granite stone that I chose myself. His mother wanted something more elaborate. I wanted something that looked like him. Clean, not flashy, built to last. I sat on the bench near the path, and I thought about the playpen by the window and the summer without payroll and the 33 years. I thought about Cynthia, who I love, who was already planning her wardrobe for a Christmas trip she didn't know hadn't been confirmed. I thought about my granddaughters, who are 7 and 4, and are genuinely perfect and did not do anything wrong. And I thought about myself. Because here is the thing about becoming invisible. It doesn't happen suddenly. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to stop seeing you. It happens in small increments, little assumptions that accumulate like snow. You're available. You're flexible. You're the kind of person who makes things work. You pay for dinner because you always have. You host Christmas because that's what you do. You absorb the cost of being the stable one because stability is its own reward, isn't it? At some point, people stop asking and start assuming. And if you've never corrected the assumption, you've participated in building it. I had participated. For years, I'd paid for dinners I hadn't chosen and trips I hadn't planned and celebrations that were more about optics than about family. I'd done it because Gordon and I were fortunate and generosity came naturally to us. And also, I will be honest, because I wanted to be wanted. Because after Gordon died, being needed felt a little bit like being loved. That's the part nobody talks about. How grief can make you permeable. How you let things in because the alternative is an emptiness you can't face before 9 in the morning. I drove home. I called Patrick, my financial advisor. Not for advice exactly, more for grounding. He has a way of talking about money that takes the emotion out of it, and sometimes that's exactly what I need. I told him what had happened. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, "That's not really a financial question, Beverley." I told him I knew. I booked a flight on Monday. Not because of the flight. The flight was almost secondary. I booked it because I had been privately considering it for 2 years and had never given myself permission. After Gordon died, I'd found a notebook in his desk drawer, one of those hardcover ones he used for jotting things. The last page had a list. No heading, no date, just a list. The Cotswolds, PEI in blueberry season, Banff in winter, Vancouver Island, Churchill, Northern Lights. That was all. 7 places he'd wanted to go and hadn't. I had been to none of them. I booked Churchill, Manitoba. If you don't know it, Churchill is a small town on the shore of Hudson Bay in northern Manitoba. It is accessible by plane or by a train that takes 2 from Winnipeg. It is one of the best places in the world to see the northern lights, and in late fall, it is also polar bear season, and you can take a vehicle called a tundra buggy out onto the flats and watch them move across the landscape like something from before human time. Gordon had written it at the bottom of the list with a small star beside it. I booked a small group tour. 8 nights, departing November 15th. I arranged for my neighbor's granddaughter to check on the house. I told my sister, who lives in Guelph and who said, "Bev, good. Finally, do you need anything?" I told her I didn't. I did not post about it on Facebook. I did not mention it in the group chat. I did not make an announcement. I called Cynthia privately and told her the lodge wasn't happening, that the plan had changed, and that I hoped she and Rod would come for Christmas dinner at my house instead. Simple, just the people who mattered. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Did my nephew do something?" I told her nothing was wrong. She didn't entirely believe me, but she said she'd come for dinner and that she'd bring the shortbread. The group chat continued without me. My son sent 2 more messages over the following week. One asking if I'd had a chance to look at the lodge website. One saying that the Hendersons were asking about a confirmation. I read both of them and I did not reply. On November 3rd, 12 days before my flight, my son called. I was in the backyard raking leaves, which I do every fall in a state of mild fury because there are 3 maples now, Gordon's original, and 2 we planted in the 90s, and they are generous trees. I answered because I always answer. That's another thing I'm working on. He started with the pleasant opener. "How are you? How are the Leafs? Did you see the Leafs game?" I said yes to the Leafs and no to the Leafs. Then he got to it. "Mom, I need to know about the lodge. I can't keep telling the Hendersons it's pending." I stopped raking. I held the phone and looked at the maple Gordon had carried from the nursery in burlap. "I'm not booking the lodge," I said. A pause. "What?" "Mom, we talked about this. People are expecting." "I know what people are expecting," I said. "I'm not booking it. $4,000 for a Christmas holiday I didn't plan and didn't choose is not something I'm going to do." His voice shifted. Not angry exactly. My son doesn't do anger easily. But tight. "We thought you'd want to be involved. We thought this would be something nice for the family." "Then book it yourself," I said. "Or find something else. I think Christmas at my house would be lovely. I'd be very happy to have everyone here." "Mom, the girls are excited. They've been talking about it. And that one landed a little. I won't pretend it didn't. Because the girls. But I also know the girls are 7 and 4, and they are excited about approximately everything, including an episode of a cartoon about a dog that I've seen 11 times, and they will not remember whether Christmas happened at Hartwell Lodge or my kitchen table. But they might someday remember whether their grandmother was the kind of woman who held herself with dignity. I hope they have a wonderful Christmas wherever it is, I said. I love them very much, and I'm not booking the lodge. I went inside and finished my coffee. 3 days later, I sat down and wrote 2 letters. I don't email important things. I never have. Gordon and I communicated by notes our entire marriage. Little things left on the counter, longer things, when we needed to say something carefully. I have a box of his notes in the closet in the spare room. I don't open it often, but I know exactly where it is. I wrote my son a letter. Not an angry letter, not a list of grievances. I wrote him the truth, which I had apparently been keeping too close for too many years. I told him about the shop on King Street. I told him about the playpen by the window. I told him about the summer Gordon sold his truck. I told him about 33 years of early mornings and late invoices and the particular satisfaction of watching something you built become real. I told him that his father had written a list in a notebook that I'd found after he died, and that I had spent 4 years not giving myself permission to do the things on that list, and that I had decided I was done waiting for permission. I told him I was going to Churchill to see the Northern Lights. I told him that I loved him, that I loved his wife, that I loved those girls more than I have words for. I told him that I was 67 and that I had spent a long time making myself available and not enough time making myself whole. I told him that the lodge was his idea and that he was welcome to pursue it, and that I wished him luck. I sealed the envelope. I left it on his car when I drove by their house on my way to the post office because I knew he'd be home and I didn't want a conversation. I had already said what I needed to say. Then I mailed a second letter. To my daughter-in-law, her letter was shorter and perhaps more direct. I told her I had noticed over the past several years a pattern of her and my son presenting me with plans that had already been set in motion, leaving me the role of funder or logistical support. I told her I suspected she didn't see it that way, and perhaps she was right, but that from where I was standing it had started to feel like being managed rather than included. I told her I didn't want to carry that quietly anymore. I told her I would always be glad to be asked, and that being asked was different from being informed. I told her I thought she was a good mother, and I meant it. I signed it, Beverley. I drove to the airport on November 15th at 5 in the morning. My car is a 2021 Subaru Forester, and it handles well in early snow, which there was, just a dusting, the first of the season. I parked in long term. I took my carry-on and my good winter coat. Gordon had given me a proper down parka for my 60th birthday, and I'd never found an occasion worthy of it until now. I flew to Winnipeg and then on a smaller plane to Churchill. It was the first time I had traveled alone since before Gordon got sick. The town is small, a few hundred people, or fewer depending on the season. There's a main street, a hotel, the kind of quietness that a city person notices in their body before they notice it in their head. I was one of 8 on the tour, a retired school teacher from Victoria, a couple from Halifax celebrating their anniversary, a man from Toronto who'd been planning the trip for 5 years and kept saying so, a pair of sisters from Saskatoon in matching Helly Hansen jackets. The first night was cloudy. The second night, we were out on the tundra in the buggy after dinner, and the guide told us to look north, and I did, and there they were. I don't know how to write about the Northern Lights without sounding like a greeting card. I'll try anyway. They moved the way water moves when you drop something into it. Rings expanding outward, but vertical, green, and then a thread of pink at the edge. They were quiet. Obviously they were quiet. They're light. But that's the thing that got me, how silent it all was. The tundra, the sky, the lights moving without making a sound. I stood there in Gordon's parka, and I cried, which I had not expected, and the retired school teacher from Victoria put her hand on my arm without saying anything, and I was grateful for that. I thought about the notebook. I thought about the maple in the backyard. I thought about how long I had been standing still, holding things up for other people, and how it had felt like love but had also, slowly, quietly, become its own kind of loss. I was there for 8 nights. I saw the lights 4 more times. I took photographs that don't do it justice. I ate too much at the lodge restaurant and slept well for the first time in months. I called my sister from the hotel lobby one evening and told her about the lights, and she cried a little too and said, "Gordon would have loved this." I told her I knew. I told her I thought he did, in some way, which is the kind of thing I only say to people I trust completely. When I flew home, the maple was bare. November had finished what October started. There was a voicemail from my son. He'd called while I was in the air. His voice was different from the last time, quieter, slower, that register that means he's thought about something properly. "Mom, I got your letter. I didn't know about the shop. I mean, I knew Dad had a print shop, but I didn't know about the truck. or about when you started? I've been thinking about it for a few days. A pause. I think I owe you an apology, not just about the lodge. I think there's more to it than that, and I'm not sure I know the whole shape of it yet, but I'm sorry, Mom. I'd like to talk when you're ready. I stood in my kitchen in my coat, snow still on my boots, and I listened to it twice. The second time I noticed he'd said, "When you're ready." Not, "Call me back." Not, "We need to talk." When you're ready. That was new. I put the kettle on. I took off my boots. I sat down at the kitchen table and I looked out at the maple, bare and gray against the November sky. That tree Gordon had carried in burlap in the back of a car that cost less than a weekend at Hartwell Lodge. I picked up the phone. I called my son. Not because I had forgiven everything, or worked it all out, or arrived at some clean resolution. Life doesn't do that, and I've been around long enough to know. I called him because he'd left a door open and I was choosing to walk through it, on my own terms, in my own time. He answered on the second ring. "Hi, Mom." "Hi," I said. "I just got back. You should see Churchill in November. I think your father would have wanted us both to go someday." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'd like that." The kettle started. I got up to pour it. Outside, the first snow of November was beginning to fall on Gordon's maple, slow and even, the way good things sometimes arrive, without announcement, without drama, just quietly taking up the space they were always meant to fill.